we sometimes feel like we have to keep on pursuing a relationship because we're Christians, when sometimes I think we actually have to set a boundary for ourselves, and maybe that's not a relationship we need to pursue for right now.
Like even Proverbs says, the wounds of a friend are faithful, right? And so sometimes it's a good wound because you had a blind spot, or you were mucking around and someone called you and like up to a standard, and it hurts.
We need to have these awkward conversations with people and be like, hey, this is hard for me. I'm having a hard time. I'm feeling like I'm walking on eggshells around you. Before just like putting up that boundary, have a conversation.
But I mean, look, you were T9 texting. It was a whole ordeal. You had to like.
You just use one hand.
You had to, not this guy. Like
for T9?
As a therapist, if I start crying in front of my client, is that going to communicate to them that I can't handle their stuff? Or is it going to communicate, no, I deeply feel you and I'm with you?
I was trying, the sugar watermelon. I was trying to tell Lindsay that song was stuck in my head.
Were you trying to say watermelon sugar? But she started with sugar melon.
Yeah, because I don't know how it goes. And so I literally told Lynn, like, I was like, this song has been stuck in my head all morning and I don't even know how to sing it. And so I was going, and he was like, I have no idea what you're doing.
So that song.
Is it everywhere right now? I'm confused. Like, why is it in my head?
It's a summer song, number one, but it's a really catchy tune. And so our kids heard it, and then that's all they ever want to be played.
Interesting.
But
maybe it was from them.
But if you look into what the actual meaning behind the song is, you'd be like, kid, you shouldn't be singing that.
That's so often the case.
Like our kids, I don't know if this is like too much, but our kids will ask Alexa to play a song about random stuff. But we have like the safe filter on, explicit, yeah. And so sometimes when they'll say like, "Can you play a song about cheese?" she'll be like, "This is explicit, blah, blah, blah. I can't play the song." But they said sausage, and there's this like really upbeat song, and it's hard to know what it's saying, but it's like a really fun song. And so Lindsay ended up going and like just double checking the lyrics on Google, and he's like, "You're not allowed to listen to this song." But it's same.
But it wasn't an explicit song.
No.
But the lyrics
are dicey. Like it's just like if you knew them.
Is it a rap song?
No.
Like how?
You can ask Alexa later.
I will. And
Everyone now.
What's the name of the song?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know?
It's about sausage.
A sausage song.
Everybody go to your Amazon Alexa and say, play the sausage song.
Our kids are like obsessed with sausage. We eat sausage like every day.
It's called the sausage song. Okay. No, nobody play that song. Lindsay just looked up the lyrics.
However,
nobody play that song.
But you know, like songs where they're singing it so fast, like sugar, watermelon, whatever.
Watermelon sugar.
They're singing it so fast that you don't know what they're saying. And so kids just think this is a fun song to dance to. So really, like we could talk about like music and listening to music and how different words.
We should do a podcast on music.
Yeah, because listening, it's interesting what it can do for you.
I'll give you just an example. I find that in seasons of my life where I feel like I'm really walking closely with the Lord, because there's seasons of like wilderness, but when I feel like I'm really sensitive to the things of the Spirit in particular seasons, I'll be listening to songs that in other seasons I was like, oh, I like this song, and then it's almost as though like the lyrics are highlighted to me, and I'm so grieved by it, and it's when you're more saturated by the Holy Spirit, and you're
more refined.
Yeah, you are. You're more refined, and so you're sensitive to anything that is not glorifying creation and Jesus.
The same
in the
with
way
shows,
it's supposed to.
right? Like TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny how even when we want to do right by the Lord and what He's asked us to do and walk humbly and holy before Him, how just proximity to the Holy Spirit will allow it. Sometimes it'll be like, oh, this is permissible. But the closer you get to the Holy Spirit, it's like, no, this is less.
This actually isn't gray anymore. This is black.
And I think it's a maturing thing.
Yeah.
It's a maturing thing in the body of Christ. And one thing.
That's why you have to be careful who you're judging.
Oh,
right? Because if they're not in the level, for sure.
Yeah. And I think for us Christians who've been around significantly longer, we need to be way more merciful and gracious to newer believers. And rather than like getting on them really easily, just, move alongside them and help them mature. I was watching something recently, and it just kind of recalled for me that if you look at all of the writings of the New Testament, you can put aside the Gospels, but the main focus of Paul, right? Paul's writings and the other epistles, the whole point of it is to mature Christians. That's the whole point of it, is to take brand new believers and create mature Christians. And a lot of the time we get caught up in a lot of the weird minutia of it, and it's like he just wants his bride mature. Like this is the whole point of this. And so when it comes back to maybe letting go of some music, maybe letting go of some friendships, maybe letting go of like lots of different things that we
having boundaries.
Yeah. Well, but it's true though. Like you have to start setting up boundaries when you start moving. It's almost like a gate that you close behind you on some things when you're moving forward.
I remember go. I remember it was early 2000s. I was like maybe around grade 12 or so, and I was in a car with a friend who was listening to Eminem, and I remember hearing the lyrics, and it was like, oh gosh, I can't listen to this. And for him, it was the way he was responding to the music. It was almost as if it was life-giving to him. I think we had this conversation before too of how listening
like
to
U2, going to a U2 concert, like that kind of like feeding your soul
in the sense of this is very validating of my experience right now. And he had been through some really tough stuff in life and was going through stuff at that time. And so a lot of the anger that was coming out in the music was something that resonated with his soul. And so for me, it might have been a boundary moment of like my ears. And yet for him, it was doing something for him. And how to navigate that mind versus him. And
like different levels, right? Like equally yoked kind of thing. Like if that was like a future spouse, you might be like, oh, maybe we're at different pages. You know what I mean? Like different spots for connecting.
Really quickly, for those who are listening and not watching my video, we came in real hot in this episode right away. Dr. Danielle Jeffery is in studio with us for this podcast. That's right, Dr. Danielle Jeffery. We are moving on up in the world. We got doctors on the podcast now. That's right. And so she is a psychotherapist with her own practice. She joined us on an episode early on. I can't remember the number of the episode.
I think it was like 3 or 4.
But you can go back and look for it. But she's here on the couch, ready to dive back into some things. And we're excited to have her.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks, guys, for having me back.
So good.
And I'll do the head thing for Chris this time because you can't really move.
Yeah. Also, if you're watching, I'm sitting not where I normally sit. I jacked up my neck over the weekend, and so it's best if I not be turning back and forth a lot. So Danny's doing us. Dr. Danielle is doing us a solid.
Yeah, we're going to go with Danny.
All right, Danny. All right.
But we're not going to call you Pastor Chris or Reverend Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But in case you missed our not so subtle segue, we're talking about boundaries today.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about some things within Christian culture, and frankly, just some human nature that we want to look at and see. What does Scripture say about this? How would Jesus set these boundaries up? Because there's pros and cons and healthier ways to do this. And so we want to dive into some of these things. But my first introduction to even the idea of boundaries was the book Boundaries, which I'm assuming you know of, and it was very challenging to me because as much as I'm a reserved person, I don't even think to set up established, don't cross this line type things within relationships. And so as I read that book, and I was given that straight out of Bible college, I see that smirk over there and that laugh. What would you like to say?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
No, nothing.
It'll come out later, maybe.
So
no, we argue sometimes about. Not argue, but we're like, oh, we need to have more boundaries.
Yeah. And
between the two of you?
Yes.
In general, yeah. Like, well, because
because
all right, let's therapize.
Because we're both probably oversharers.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like allergies, butt creams.
Oh, well, we got to go back and start this podcast over.
No,
butt cream working. Okay, Chris,
not my butt cream.
No, you recommended a butt cream to me.
A wipe post Mexico trip. Okay.
I thought we were talking about babies.
Oh my gosh, no.
No. Okay, so I had a very raw experience in Mexico. I'll just word it like that.
And then you heard that I was having some issues.
Some shrimp ceviche took a wild turn on day 3 of a 7-day
I'm
Mexico
allergic
trip.
to cashews. Oh.
Anyway, so for anybody who's wondering where we overshare, this would be the spot where we overshare.
And now to everybody.
Yeah, and everybody else
so maybe
knows
let's start
boundaries.
with lay some groundwork when we're talking about boundaries. Yep. Okay, so this whole talk of boundaries is rooted in a couple of different realms. So one is like the ethical and philosophical, basically what you guys are describing. Where do I end and you begin? And there's many interpretations of that and cultural differences on the interpretation of that. So you have like the philosophical, ethical realm, but then you also have the professional realm, and that's where then it got translated into our personal relationships. So like professional relationships, think about, we were talking about this just before the podcast started too, with Justine and I, with regards to therapy. So if I'm sitting with a client, what is going to ensure my client's safety? If they know certain aspects of my personal life, is that going to be okay for them to know that about me? Or is that going to be not so helpful for them? Is that going to change how they view me in this process? Are they going to, so for example, as a therapist, if I start crying in front of my client, is that going to communicate to them that I can't handle their stuff? Or is it going to communicate, no, I deeply feel you and I'm with you? And so it's always gauging how much of my personal life am I opening up to my client, and again prioritizing their well-being, their safety, and ensuring that it maintains this professional relationship. And so then from there it got applied to our personal relationships. Well, yeah, how does that relate to my personal well-being and how I function in relationships?
So like in our, let's just stay on this with us, like, so there's personally we're friends. Technically I'm related to Lindsay. So I say technically because like there's lots
for marriage.
It's blood, but it's like it's like fourth cousins. Like it's there's distance, right?
I remember you guys saying that.
Yeah. So
though Oliver was listing his cousins and I was like, there aren't 6. And so then he was like, whoa, Rosie and Brooks. And I was like, okay, that's a stretch, but
technically yes. But
it's technically yes.
So we're close friends, but we're also colleagues. And we're oversharers, but we work closely together on a ton of projects, and yet like we're like there's like we overshare. Like I'm always interested in to see like where should that line be, because we're also like, you want to walk honoring of even your spouse too, right? Like keep a veil of certain things, like and so what would you recommend for someone maybe who works really closely with someone of the opposite sex, even at their work, with boundaries like that?
That's a great question. I think it's so context dependent.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and it changes based on personalities, and again, what's deemed culturally acceptable. And I think the safest thing is just a high degree of self-awareness. How am I receiving this? How am I interpreting this? How do I see Justine is relating to what I am sharing right now? How is this impacting her? How can I best protect her and take care of her? Does this feel safe for me, for Justine to know this about me?
Right.
It's a number of things. It's more about self-awareness as opposed to here's the line and don't cross it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I know like even at like a board meeting or a staff meeting, Justine and I will almost lock horns and people just sit back and start laughing because like we usually we agree on what we're locking horns about. It's just our approaches and how we want to go about it are different. And I'm almost positive it makes some people uncomfortable.
Right. For sure.
Because you just look around, and mainly our boss gets uncomfortable because you can see it on his face. He doesn't want to deal with that. But yeah, like to be better, I guess. But I think it's okay because we have a genuine love for one another and a respect for one another. Like, I deeply value Justine, even though I would never outright say it except on a podcast. I deeply value Justine, her abilities within her sphere of expertise, and what she brings to the table spiritually. There's lots of things, but a lot of the times, so he can
say some mean comments and get away with it because you value me.
Yeah, but also, like, we bicker like brother and sister too, right? So that's part of the reason we even started this podcast. No, but we say
sorry too. Like, so.
Oh yeah, no, we're quick to apologize.
Like, I remember one time in my 2 offices ago, I remember sitting at the desk and Chris was upset about something, and I said some suggestion, and I knew I went too far with my suggestion, in speaking forward directly or whatever, and I knew that it like hit you the wrong way and I had crossed the line, and I went and apologized. But we do that. So there are different moments where I'm sure we can think of a handful where we have crossed the line of like, no, that's not your place to say something like to, and then you apologize. And I think that's like really important in boundaries is being able to forgive people when they have crossed those lines, right?
Definitely. And how much are we like putting names on these or trying to fit things into the box of boundaries when this is like what you're describing is like love and healthy relationship where, yeah, you guys are going to cross each other. It's banter and it's fun. And I would love to explore what it does for both of you. And there's much more for us to talk about that.
But in every like friendship and relationship, right?
Yeah.
If it's a true relationship,
you're gonna hurt each other.
You're gonna hurt people.
Yep.
And that's where you need to be willing to say sorry and willing to forgive.
Well, in Proverbs, like even Proverbs says, the wounds of a friend are faithful, right? And so sometimes it's a good wound because you had a blind spot or you were mucking around and someone called you and like up to a standard and it hurts. But it's the faithfulness of that friend. And I wonder if sometimes, and you can probably speak to this because I know we're going to head maybe this way. Do you think that oftentimes we put up quote unquote boundaries because we don't want to risk the offense in a relationship? In the sense that I think one of the reasons Justine and I work so well together is there's no fear between us to offend one another because we know either it's something they needed to hear or we'll double back and apologize really quickly, because a lot of conversations that are important are risky in nature because there's an opportunity to offend that person in that conversation. Do you think that maybe we put up boundaries because we don't want people to see us as we are, or risk that they will say something that offends us in a way we actually need to be offended? And this exists a lot within the church. Because you have the type that have no boundary and are walking in, as we learned about yesterday at church, judgmentalism. They have like zero boundary and they will say the first thing and it hurts and it cuts and it's damaging
and
people.
There's no relationship.
Yeah, zero relationship. And then you got the flip side where it's like, you can't tell me anything. This is a boundary that I have, even though they are in desperate need of maybe someone to break through.
Or so, love. Like, I respond to this, but then I'll comment after.
Yeah, that's okay. Do you want to?
No.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a whole spectrum, which then brings us back to that ethical lens of identity and self-differentiation of where do I start and end, and where does this person I'm talking to or in relationship with start and end, and that has so many implications. So when you're talking about people pleasing, or even like if Justine is aching in something, are we enmeshed in the sense of if she's going through something, I feel it as if I'm going through it too,
like too
where
much,
there's a loss of my own identity because I'm going through what you're going through. Or to the other extreme of what you're talking about, Chris, too, is the weaponizing of boundaries, where it's maybe that comes across in judgmentalism, or I am punishing you, what you did to me. It's not so much about protecting you and protecting me, but because you did this to me, I'm setting this firm boundary, and again, that has many implications, and I don't know how explicit or deep or things we want to go into that, but in romantic relationships
okay, so really, I guess our primary focus
is within the church.
Yeah,
so let's talk people pleasing.
Yeah, let's talk people pleasing, because that people pleasing.
But there is part. So the part I wanted to say is, I think a lot of people in the church, not people pleasing, but a lot of people in the church have these boundaries set up that then they don't let other people in. Mm-hmm. And so there's no iron sharpens iron, right? Mm-hmm. There's no deep relationships taking place. And they're
doing church alone in a crowd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
But if you're not allowing people, because people have trauma, mm-hmm. right? And, I find it hard when people have walls up and you can't get through the wall to the real person. Mm-hmm. And they have these walls up to protect them, probably because they've been hurt before. But then they're like, I would rather not love and be hurt than love and be hurt. Like, mm-hmm. we all have a choice every day of like, am I going to invest in this friendship or relationship or whatever? But it comes with a risk. Love comes with a risk of losing someone or fighting or whatever. And people, when they come to like conflict, then they think, oh, the relationship is over if they're one of those people who finally let their wall down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if we've learned in life anything, it's after the hard challenges, generally you're stronger, mm-hmm. right? So even in relationships, after those, like a fight or whatever, generally
there's greater intimacy.
You have more trust in that person because you were able to go mm-hmm. go through conflict, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not ever allowing conflict, then everything stays surface level and there's no depth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're reminding me of walking our dog. We have a border collie at home, Finley. Mm-hmm. This morning, Patrick and I are taking him for a run, and there's some dogs that Finn will go nuts on, mm-hmm. and then other ones that aren't an issue. And so for the other dog's protection as well as Finley, it's okay. We're getting that short collar, and I'm holding you up so your head's gonna stay can't look anywhere but straight, and we'll keep going, right? So a boundary, again, the leash is another form of a boundary, mm-hmm. and there's other times where we can let that extended leash go all the way out, and it's okay. And so again, it's about like that protection you said about trauma. So for some people, it's going to be I need a short leash on me right now, that I might say or do something because this is triggering for me, or this is overwhelming for me, or whatever it might be. And that's hard for other people to understand, for mm-hmm. sure. And so that's where the compassion comes in. But when do I need to short leash myself, so to speak, of that this is actually for someone else? And when is it okay for me? Do I feel safe to test those waters of, can I push those boundaries out a little more for the purpose of having healing, maybe for some of that trauma? That's
what I'm thinking is, like, if someone has boundaries up that have served as a protection, but it's been so long with those boundaries and those walls. And I would say, like, Holy Spirit can get past walls, but Holy Spirit won't force his self on you. So when I teach the kids about Holy Spirit, I have the umbrella, and I have an umbrella. I get a kid to hold an umbrella, and it's like, if you have that wall up of an umbrella, then Holy Spirit wants to pour out, and it's like water pouring, but it hits the umbrella and it can't touch you, right?
Yeah.
And God wants us to be like abandoned to him.
Yes.
And so we take the umbrella off and then like this and then pour the water all over the child. But I've talked to the child before. I don't just soak a child. But it is a super powerful analogy. But I feel like in the church, there's a lot of people walking with umbrellas and walls and
okay, so you're talking from the
from a pastoral
perspective. Yeah. So if we go psychotherapeutic and maybe even incorporate that in terms of how do we operate healthy relationships in the church. So maybe that is from the pastoral perspective of challenging, and yet in relationship with one another. Okay, this is one again. Justine and I were talking about like the sister relationship. Me being the youngest of three, we know these sister relationships, and I had one sister that. When we would fight growing up, she would need her space. And for me, I would just fight to get her to talk to me. We got to resolve this. Like I couldn't sit with that conflict. We got to work through this together. And yet the times when we did that, it would blow up even more. And so it took me years until I was an adult to recognize, oh gosh, if I give her space, we're going to come back together. I need to accept that boundary. And so then again, with us in the church, how can, if I want to encourage my brothers and sisters, one of the ways that I might be able to do that to help them lower their guard is by respecting their boundaries first, that they learn that they're safe with me here. So then maybe we can take that away or push it back a little bit more.
Yeah. Time and love. Okay, so that's the other one that you pointed on that maybe ties this back together too, that difference between... Okay, so the issue of people pleasing is actually, that's more about me than the person that I'm trying to please, right? Like that's about my fear of not being affirmed, accepted. I'm not going to belong, or they're going to be mad at me if I don't do this, or I'm not good enough if I don't do this. If it's coming from a spirit of fear or guilt, that's people pleasing. Whereas if I'm thinking about, okay, what is the best for this person and for me, and what does that look like? Okay, I have an example of this. One of the ways that I had to learn boundaries early on, and again, it relates to professional as well as personal. So I had just gotten home from a full day of work, and usually that's about 6 hours of therapy for me. And then I have, this time Isla was a baby. So I have Isla on my hip. She was upset while I'm cooking, and I'm helping Patrick with his homework, and I'm not sure where Preston was at the time. So at this moment, again, juggling all these things in the kitchen, I get a phone call from a client. And I went to go pick it up, and then I was just realizing, no, I can't actually operate as a psychotherapist in this moment. Yeah. I don't have the resources, the time, the space for me to be what this person calling me needs me to be. And I didn't answer the phone. And that helped me to identify more clearly what these boundaries are. People pleasing would have been, okay, maybe this fear. Person needs me. They need me right now, or they're going to be upset with me if I don't answer, or they're whatever it is. But I'm actually protecting them by not answering the phone and then calling them back when I'm in a space where I can.
I think with the way technology has moved, we haven't adapted our approach. We've just kind of absorbed it all. Like the iPhone wasn't invented until my second year of college, right? So like cell phones are around, but I mean, look, you were T9 texting. It was a whole ordeal. You had to like...
You just use one hand.
You had to... Not this guy. Like
for T9?
Yeah, really? Listen, I was a little slow to the race, but yeah, like with text messaging, with cell phones, there's an expectation of I can get your attention anytime I want. Whereas prior to that, 24 hours for someone to respond to you was perfectly acceptable, and nobody expected less. Even if you left a voicemail, like, get back to me at your earliest convenience. But now we feel like if I think it, I should send. And it's not even just whether you'll respond. There's a lack of decorum and even like breaking into people's lives when, honoring their time they're with their family. They're not at work. And so the boundaries of here in Ontario, there's been like litigation in regards to employees not being obligated to respond to emails after hours. Like that's how bad it's gotten, right? And
which
so,
is sad.
Yeah.
And it all started to make our lives easier.
What was made,
Yeah.
We always abuse the things that were given to us to make life easier. And so to your point that you were making, it seems as though the people pleasing can go both ways. I quickly need to get to somebody, but I'm also invading in their space. But on the flip side, I don't want whoever's sending me a text message to think I don't care or I'm ignoring them, or when in actuality, like, you're with your family, like, chill, relax, like, be focused, be present. And we struggle to be present in this age of media.
And I don't even think that is just with work, but also anyone who messages you, you feel obligated to respond to. And
especially with read receipts, if you see that they read it and they don't respond.
That's a hard, sorry, were you done that?
But like, yeah, it's just, if I spent my whole, like, responding to people's like messages or whatever, then I would be on my phone
all day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that this also relates to when we were talking before about, or I just mentioned the cultural differences, and in terms of our priorities and how that translates when in this new digital era of like responding right away. So like growing up, my family, again, Italian, Ukrainian upbringing, the door was always open. Mom cooked for everyone, nursed everyone. Everyone would come in when they were sick or whatever, injury, recovering. Mom would help rehabilitate them. She had a nursing background. And it was always considering, how do we be the hands and feet of Jesus for other people? And that's what our family and our home was. So all the time, other people were put first and first and first, and we care for them. And that's how I was raised. And then marrying Ryan came from a different interpretation of what that would look like. Yeah. And this came up in the growth track where we learned about the hot and cold cultures. Yeah. And so Ryan, coming from a bit British background, has more firm boundaries in these ways, whereas again I didn't. And so that was the one that we had to work out in our marriage. It came to the point where Ryan said to me, Danny, I feel like everyone comes before us. And that was like a brick in the face of, I had to realize, oh my goodness, I am, like, every time I'm doing this for someone else, I'm sacrificing the ones that I'm responsible to care for. So yeah, how does that translate when, yes, whether I'm answering messages on my phone or answering the phone call or whatever it might be, what are those boundaries? And I have to engage with them flexibly, as does Ryan. And I think we've found our own groove between both of our families.
My dad, he grew up, my grandma wanted to have like tons of kids. She came from a family of 14, and she ended up only being able to have 5. So she fostered a bunch, which they're very spread out. It's just funny
to say that
she was only able to have 5. So she fostered a bunch of kids. And so my dad, when he got married and him and my mom had children, my mom like said, oh, I wouldn't mind like fostering kids or having more kids or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that, because I felt like I always had to share my parents with other people. And so it's interesting how boundaries change, right? Of what people interpret them as. And so we have to be careful also, like, what we think in our minds, we're not projecting in someone else's mind, right? Yes. Like, this is where my boundary is. Like, they should have the same kind of boundary, right? But because different cultures, different backgrounds, different upbringings, we all, even if we had the more upbringing, you could have been like, oh, I hated that we nursed everyone and everyone always came first. But you grew up in a positive way of it, where your sister might not have, right? Like, Lindsay with his family, he always is like, oh, like, I don't remember that like trauma from my childhood or something like that. Because different personalities too, right? Like it's just completely different. And so it's hard. It's something that we have to constantly remember in the church, is like, just because I think this way doesn't mean you think this way, right?
The only thing that we should all think identically on is scripture. We should all be arriving that this is the truth. But everything else, like, is up for...
Yet that gets...
and working
easily, right? But everything else is up for interpretation outside of the context of Scripture, because I mean, you know, growing up in Canada versus growing up in Zimbabwe, drastically different. Even your approach to understanding of the gospel would be drastically different, because we come from we can do it on our own. They come from we rely on the Lord more, and all of that type of stuff. But I want to go back to something you said, because it's very easy to spiritualize a lack of boundaries because you're the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because when you said that about your mom, it's so beautiful that was her approach.
Yeah.
And it worked for your family.
Yeah.
But for other people,
your mission.
Yeah. For other people, you know, many a pastor's kid has been a sacrificial offering on the altar of ministry. And so where do you think we can start to pick apart or identify what is healthy in maybe going the extra mile as a believer in the opportunity of ministry versus like hazard to the wind, like I'm gonna minister to Jesus at the risk of losing my marriage, my family, like all those sort of, having those boundaries.
Okay, so there's a couple things there also. I think one, if we're talking about love, one of the therapeutic words we use is attunement. How attuned am I to the needs of, okay, this person who I want to invite into my home who's needing a meal or whatever it is. And I'm also attuned to my child who is having a really hard time at school that maybe just needs mom time right now.
Yeah.
How am I attuned to the people who are maybe needing the hands and feet of Jesus in that moment, and I'm in the capacity to provide it, but I also have limited resources. And so what would that look like? What am I prioritizing, and why am I prioritizing? Again, that's the self-awareness component. Right. And the other one, I think, I don't know if I'm exposing you right now.
Expose away.
Yeah. Okay.
If you don't, she'll figure it out down the road.
Well, I was thinking about this in our conversation we had the other day when I was sharing with you that I was inviting some friends to church, and we were talking about how often when you hear about that, the sense of responsibility that you feel, that the weight of, do I need to do something special? Do I need to perform like that? That there's a certain level of, I need to make this good for our guests, right?
Irrationally. And I know it's irrational too. That's the funny part.
But I think that's also someone who cares deeply about souls and people's salvation, and you're passionate about the work that you do. And so naturally that comes out. But one of maybe the distinctions that's helpful for us in setting a boundary in that way, I heard this a little while ago and I loved it, that we are responsible to, but not responsible for.
Right.
And so we're responsible to show up, maybe to be hands and feet in Jesus, or I'm responsible to really usher everyone into this a spirit of worship and the congregation on Sunday mornings. And yet I am not responsible for the presence of God coming down. I'm not responsible for their salvation. I'm not responsible for them to overcome depression. I'm not responsible for fill in the blank, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
it's your faithfulness to, right?
Like, as opposed to for. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great articulation of that. But it's crazy how we can immediately take on the weight of something that's not ours to bear.
Yes.
And in people pleasing, we're taking on this extra weight of like whatever the motivation is.
Yeah.
That it's like no, like you can't. Like you learn very quickly in ministry, particularly, you will never please everybody. Never. Like just pick a topic. Yeah. And we have stories.
Mm-hmm. There's been 17.
Oh, you know the exact amount?
No, I mean, like how many podcasts have we done?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Pick a topic.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We've talked about 17 previous to this and much more to come.
Yeah. And so like you'll never make everybody happy, but if you're striving to make everybody happy, it feels to me like you lose a bit of yourself.
Oh, where's that again, the differentiation? Where is it? Where am I respecting their autonomy, their development? Where does it become I'm starting to enable For example, to use the Justine example again, if she's really, really hurting and I feel it as if I'm going through what she's going through. And so every time I'm trying to solve Justine's problems and I'm carrying the weight of them, and that's something we should talk about, carrying each other's burdens.
Yep.
Yeah. But this idea of I'm actually enabling Justine's dependency on me. And while there is strength in sharing and going through this together, where is that line where all of a sudden I'm disempowering you?
Yeah. So I have heard this thing that so say you have 3 children and 2 of them are healthy and 1 is sick. When you give as a mom, all of your attention to the sick one, you're actually enabling them to be sick. Yes. And I know this is but it's because you then are not giving your energy and time to your other 2 children. And so it's it's almost good to be sick because there's so much attention to, do you know what I'm, do you know what I'm saying? So it's it's letting you know, and coddling, right? Rather than treating you're going to get better. It's going to be you know what I mean? Not that you always have to be positive, because as someone who struggles with worrying about things, and you're always positive. Lindsay's always positive. He's everything's going to be okay.
Sorry, you're positive, bro.
But that also speaks to the dynamic between the 2 of you, right? He would become more positive the more worried you get.
Oh, for sure. And that's a good thing, right? That's the balance that we need. Whereas if you start carrying my burdens in a way that my burdens are hurting you, right? Then that is not going to bring us out, right?
Yeah.
So
we learn who we are based on how other people engage with us, especially our parents. That's
you don't want to be affirmed in your sickness.
That I'm weak. Am I learning that I can't do this on my own? Yeah. And again, this is context specific for sure.
Yeah.
And then also the impact on the other kids, learning of
I don't matter as much.
Yeah.
Going back to your story of your family, and Chris asked okay, how do you know when it's too much or whatever? So one thing I think is your parents have created a culture in the home that's who you are, but checking in, if that is your desire. I have friends who that is more, they are more let's bring everyone in. My mom would have brought everyone into our home too, but in conversation with my dad and us and whatever is I remember I invited a friend for a week to camp, and she missed her mom so much, and she would call my mom, and I was so mad. I did not like it. This is my mom, not your mom. Wow. And so you can read into whatever that means. But anyway, so talking with your family, is this are you guys okay if we invite this person to stay with us for a while, right? Talking amongst one another, agreeing as a family. Absolutely. But I also think there is a part where sometimes our kids might be no, I don't want that. But you've heard from God, and you and your husband have decided that this is what we're going to do. That kids also, they're not the boss. So there is a fine line, I think, with working with your family,
that we can be attuned to that.
That this is our family mission, but also sometimes we can veto things, but other times we're not going to veto it, right? And so
that came with Rosie. I don't know if you heard about this one a couple weeks ago in church. The girls were sitting in front of us, and so Isla and Rosie are the same age and best friends, and they're adorable. And Rosie is affectionate like I am affectionate. Yeah. And so she was sitting on the pew in front of me and just kind of snuggled in. And so I'm holding her during the worship service. And Isla got sad. And she said to me, similar to what you're describing, Mommy, I felt like Rosie was going to take you away from me.
Yeah. I was young too. Yeah.
Right. And so it was a beautiful time. I'm so happy she said that to me, that then I could meet her need and affirm, I am your mom and no one can take me away from you. And also have that conversation of I can cuddle Rosie and you can be so sure that you are so safe, and anytime you need a snuggle, we will always snuggle, and that it's both, that I'm not going to now reject Rosie to make Isla feel better.
Yeah. That's what we've learned like growing up as women, especially like, my one friend is feeling, you know what I mean?
Excluded whatever it is. Yeah.
Being a girl is hard.
Being a girl is hard. Yeah. So what am I teaching Isla? If I were to do that, I would reinforce the belief that, our relationship is threatened. So you need to be concerned about that. And
Do you think that within that context, there's a lot of times that we then would flip to feel the pressure to people please and go above and beyond outside of the normal limitations that we should have to maybe shore up something like that, and it maybe creates an unhealthy imbalance? Because I can see that in some friendships I've had through the years where it feels like you then have to like go out of your way, and you're not sure whether you're doing it for you or you're doing it for them.
Right. It's exhausting. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You're wanting to solidify. Like, can you speak to like how that kind of plays out and how you should feel? Because a lot of times I think it's guilt. Like we're always trying to avoid guilt, whether it's realistically put on us or somebody else putting on us. Like, how do you combat that when, like, for instance, with the Isla situation, like, because there's a myriad of ways you could have reacted, but you didn't, go, oh, mommy loves you, don't worry, like just over the top. Whereas just simple communication of like, my heart, I know your heart, we're mom and daughter. Like, how do you combat the urge to just? I got stories I want to say, but I want to protect other people, and so I'm avoiding saying that. But so how do you? How do you work through that?
I think you pointed on it there once again, like attunement and self-awareness is, what is my reason for going over the top right now for this person? Is this about me and my guilt, or did they share something, maybe I let them down, that they needed me in a moment and I couldn't be there for them, and so I'm showing up for them because I'm actually concerned about them, that they need more of me, and in my state right now I'm actually able to do more for them, or if I'm not able to, at least I'm communicating that, or whatever it might be. Is this actually about them, or is it about me?
So will that attunement, will that help you differentiate between whether you're doing it out of truly out of a heart of love for the person versus people pleasing in some capacity, whether it's them or yourself?
So attunement is more like imagine you're tuning into a radio station like we used to do, where I'm tuning into Justine or Chris's emotions, that state of empathy where I can see that Chris is in significant pain right now because of how you're posturing your body, right? Whatever it might is, I'm tuned into. I pick up on those things. But the self-awareness is the piece of where I am, we call it metacognition, which means I'm thinking about my thoughts. So I am aware of what my thoughts are. I'm aware that right now I'm feeling guilty. Okay, so this guilt, is this about me or is it them? I'm not doing something that they need from me right now. Like, I'm feeling guilty because I let them down. Am I feeling guilty because I'm a horrible friend? For letting them down, where is this coming from, and how is that going to guide my behavior? So it's like that again, metacognition, self-awareness. I'm aware of my thoughts, my intentions.
So is there any emotional red flags to look for to even say to yourself, like, because my brain doesn't go, let's think about my thoughts.
So I am like that though. So I have.
Okay, for the rest of us normies.
No, okay, but I think that I'm constantly thinking about
your thoughts. Yeah.
Thinking about how I am. Anyway, okay, so I have an example because you don't have any examples you can use. So I had a friendship.
Boom. Roasted.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant so we can help.
Sure.
Oh. Anyway.
You can apologize to me later.
I won't. Okay. So in university, I had a friend, and we were really close, but then they didn't come back the next year. We were really close, like besties. I really don't use the word best friend very often because it leads to a lot of pressure.
Yeah. But this was meaningful, your relationship with her.
Yes.
Okay.
Lindsay's my best friend. No big deal.
No. Okay. But I think with girls, once you
Sorry, I want to apologize to my real best friends out there. Sorry, in case you're listening.
Stop talking.
Should we talk about what just happened?
No. Continue. Okay. Yeah, the actual people pleasing that just literally happened. Go ahead.
Do you call people best friend?
I have best friends, but I don't. We're not like, this is my bestie. I would say there's like
the people
there's
you're
like
close
three
to.
people that like are my ride or dies. If I pick up the phone,
right.
like,
they'll answer.
I can hop into a conversation after not seeing them for years, and like yesterday. That's what I consider a best friend.
Okay, I have tons of those then. Okay, distracted. Okay, so second year of university, she's not there. She is texting me all the time, and I am not a good texter. Like, I'm not sorry, Haley. Once you move away, I have a really hard time staying in contact with people. Not even move away, but like once you're out of my daily context, I am not a great...
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. I am not a good texter. It's just like not something I'm good at. Anyway, so she was getting really upset and feeling really hurt. And then I was carrying the guilt of her hurtness because we're best friends. And so I like literally told my therapist this story last time I was there. And so I had to, I met up with her, and I had to like break up. I had to say, I can't carry the weight of being your best friend because I feel like I'm letting you down constantly, and it's actually causing me like anguish, right? Mm-hmm. Like that I can't just like be and like do life, that I'm always like worrying about making her happy. And I don't know if that was the right thing, but it felt like the right thing for me at the time. And it's unfortunate because the friendship did end. But I feel like that was a boundary that I had to take in order to be free. I felt, you know what I mean? Like that, like
totally
stuckness. And I feel like there are some people who they have to break off relationships that are actually weighing them down because they're not that it feels controlling, not that it was meant to be controlling, but it feels controlling. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, in that example, like knowing that I need to do this for me, for my protection, and reading like, is this about like it before? Is this, am I constantly doing this to please? Right?
Right.
And what is that doing for me? What is that doing for her? Is this getting any better? You know what I mean? Yeah. And like being aware of that situation.
Yeah, I think that I'll share a similar situation. And then also it brings up maybe personal reflection of, why was this so hard of me? If we're going to go into that self-awareness, self-reflection, metacognition, what was it about her circumstances where I found myself taking on what she was going through or not meeting her expectations, or how did I interpret that, and what does that mean about me? That if I disappoint her, then I'm a bad friend. Why is it threatening for me if she's disappointed with how I'm showing up for her?
Yeah.
And so that's a beautiful area of maybe changing boundary lines in our own lives. Mm-hmm. I had a similar scenario where there was a girl who came into our lives when the kids were younger, and it was, I would almost call it like a summer fling, where right away we just connected, right? Yeah. And it was like passionate in a friendship sense, where we just clicked, and there was energy and laughter and deep emotion, and our kids got along, and it was awesome. And then heading into a season where I'm going back to school, I'm managing my practice, the 3 young kids, I just wasn't able to maintain.
Yeah.
And she was very hurt by that, to the point where I was cut out of her life.
Yeah.
And so that was the boundary line for her. And I respect that. But that was hard for me too, feeling like, gosh, I feel like I'm a constant failure here. Like I can't be what you need.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also when you enter into motherhood, that happens naturally for a lot of things. And that can put weight on you to feel like I'm not like being a good friend to these people, but your priority is your babies.
Yes. And I can clearly communicate what I am able, and getting together once a week is no longer an option at this stage of life. And yeah, I'd love to maintain the relationship, and then I can respect their autonomy of where they're at to decide that's too hard for me. I can't just have you pop in and out. I want you close. So
that's what I didn't just say friendship is over. I just communicated I can't have the title of best friend because there's an expectation. I just want friendship that can be like, hey, I haven't seen each other in a year or two, and it's just like normal. And those are the kinds of friendships that like I find life-giving.
Yeah.
So what, like, back to, I guess where my question was before, is what are some of the things that say, okay, I need to think about, like, like a trigger that goes, I need to think about why my thoughts, like you had said, like, what was it, thinking about your thoughts? Yeah. Like, what are red flags that go, I need to do a self-assessment here?
Yeah, I'd say in general, any big emotion. If I'm feeling
stress,
if my body's reacting a different way, maybe I feel sometimes physically it's like a wave comes on me, or I'm cold, or I notice my muscles tensing, or if I'm aware of the emotions themselves of like, oh, I feel like this heaviness, this burden, this stress, or if I'm highly anxious and my thoughts are spinning. Anytime there is a change in, I'm not doing it as much though this time. Yeah, that's good. This is a better seat for me, maybe. So my left hand's wild. Anytime that there's a temperature change in my body, emotionally, physically, that would be a time to self-reflect. Okay, what's going on here?
Right.
What I need to pay attention to where my thoughts are at, what emotions are here, and what do I need to do with them?
And then take those feelings and be like, is this something that I have to overcome, or is this something that maybe this is a relationship I have to step back from, right? Because if it feels like you're always walking on eggshells around somebody, then is that something, like, this is where the Christian walk can be overwhelming, and we need to wrap up soon, I think, is that we sometimes feel like we have to keep on pursuing a relationship because we're Christians, when sometimes I think we actually have to set a boundary for ourselves, and maybe that's not a relationship we need to pursue for right now, because it's causing you the anxiety or the stress, or that you're walking on eggshells, that anything could flip. Like, we all know those people who it's like you could say something and then all of a sudden you've screwed up. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Justine, after you're reminding me of another situation. So after the summer fling, if I can, I felt also like a failure, right? Like I'm not able to meet the needs. Maybe it was more so the responsible for that I was moving in. And then years later, there was another friendship that came up of someone who was struggling quite a bit. And I was immediately anxious and stressed about my ability to be a friend for her because of what her needs were, that I would let her down, and it would have serious ramifications if I let her down, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And so aware of what was coming up in me of, okay, I'm being triggered here, I got to show up, and if I don't, are we talking life or death here? Like, I felt that heavy. And then in that place of noticing what was triggering for me in prayer, bringing that before the Lord. And I don't remember the verse, and maybe you guys can help me with it, but it was something along the lines of that God will give us what we need to fulfill the tasks that He's called us to, kind of along those lines. That we will have everything that we need to be able to do.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so if He's sending you, He's equipped you. That I can't remember the exact verse off the top of my head.
Okay, but you know what I'm talking about. Wherever that was, and I have it written down somewhere. But that's what He gave me, and it just brought me to tears. And it was like, okay, Lord, I hear you. That I don't have to not be a friend to this person. That I can show up for her. You're going to give me what I need for her in this moment. And I felt with that relationship, it was something that It was a very healing one for me.
Yeah.
I still couldn't be for her everything that I would like to be. And yet that was something we were able to work out together.
Yeah. Where you had to push through, though. An
had to
example of
push
how you had to
through,
push through.
as opposed to, no, I can't go here. I learned this lesson.
Yeah.
And back to like originally what we were talking about is that rather than immediately establishing the boundary, it was like risking the risk of even having a conversation like that, because that can go wildly out of hand.
And that is important, is that instead of just putting up boundaries, what you're saying is having the conversation that might be difficult, like sitting down with my friend and being like, hey, we need to talk about this.
Like
instead
the boundaries
of just
still may go up too.
Instead of but instead of just ghosting people, because when you just like,
that's this generation right now.
But that is the generation, exactly. But we need to have these awkward conversations with people and be like, hey, this is hard for me. I'm having a hard time. I'm feeling like I'm walking on eggshells around you. Before just like putting up that boundary, have a conversation. Because maybe it's a misunderstanding. Totally. Maybe it's all in your head, right? So it's important to talk with one another.
And I feel kind of at a disadvantage because I feel like in the male context, we don't.
You don't talk about it.
No, but like in like interpersonal like male friendships, I don't think this is like something that we really think too much about. But
with women,
but maybe with a woman, But then we're like we're confused. However, but in like a work context or even within your own family, there's a different dynamic. Like I can tell you, there's 2 ways that I easily get triggered because of past like whatever in my life. I don't want to label it and give it pressure, but for instance, so like when a work issue interferes with my day off, when it's something trivial, right? If it's, if someone's in the hospital and they need to visit, absolutely, I'm game. Like this is what. But if it's if it's like a inter-office thing that could wait till like a Monday, I'm so triggered by its interruption. And I think it goes to because I struggled with not being a priority,
like being a PK,
being a pastor's kid. And so immediately it's like I'm immediately thinking about my thoughts, like, why does this affect me so much? And I still can't move past it. But I think why does this affect me so much? It's just a text message, but it feels like an incursion on like a boundary where it's just about my family. And so I struggle with that. And then the people pleasing, because a lot of guys struggle with this, because I want to represent the boys.
Men,
is that oftentimes we feel the pressure within our work. Maybe we've established a great reputation at work, or maybe we do things with a certain level of excellence. And like, I feel the pressure because I operate a particular way that everything that I do has to be to a certain level, even though if I really sat back and thought about it, it was like a smaller, dumbed down version will get the job done. But no, I'm going to lean and I'm going to do it to the nth degree. And it's taxing on me. But because I want to make sure people still see me in a particular light, and I want to make sure my boss is happy and my coworkers are happy, I will like do the extra deal. And I think for a lot of guys, those are 2 areas where maybe like they allow their work to encroach from different angles, and we don't establish firm boundaries. Because I mean, bros usually just like, are we good? Okay, we're good, right? Yeah, like
Move on.
or we just harbor deep-seated bitterness for years and never deal with it. But it goes one of 2 ways. There's no in between.
The pendulum swing.
Can you speak to that? Because I know we are like up against the clock here, but just to represent the guys, like either on the work issue or, well, I guess they were both work issues, but it was the people pleasing versus the established healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to unpack with that.
I know. I feel like you just like dropped a bomb. Like,
here, let me just this parting thought.
Yeah. One of the things also Justine and I were talking about when you were getting your adjustment done before the podcast was this idea of experimenting. And I wonder if that's even like a toes in the water with the testing of boundaries in this way of, okay, so this email came in or this call came through of something that's related to work. And I'm heavy feeling that people pleasing if I got to do this or whatever it is. again, using that self-awareness first to identify, okay, is this pressing that this needs done?
Yeah.
Is this just a trauma reaction for, I don't want to say just, but is this a trauma reaction for me that me putting a boundary line is actually reinforcing the trauma as opposed to helping me heal from it? Or is this a situation where, no, there's a problem here, that there are some boundaries that are becoming unhealthy in my relationship with work and with my family, that I need to set one? And so
having a conversation. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe putting my toes in the water in the sense of experimenting with, okay, I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to say, is this something that can wait till next week? For example, trying out that boundary as opposed to automatically just getting it done and figuring it out.
Yeah.
And see what happens. Test it. It is an experiment. What you're hypothesizing that you're going to let them down and it's all going to go horrible. But will it? Like, try it. Experiment. Try the boundary.
Or instead of having anger and harboring those feelings deep down, talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, try the conversation.
Because it won't change. Like when we expect things to be different, when we haven't actually like faced them, then we're letting ourselves down.
Yeah, I think for me too is like I fixate really easily, and so like now my mind is shifted from, hey, I'm playing with my kids, to this thing at work.
I'm annoyed,
and I get annoyed,
Yeah.
and then my mind cannot let go of it for multiple hours on end. And it's not even that I'm annoyed for multiple hours on end, but now my mind is fixated on that problem.
Because also you want it.
Yeah.
I want to deal with it, even though I know the rational right thing to do is just put it aside till Monday. And I'm just like,
okay, like, so this a therapeutic example that maybe is similar. I had to call the police with a client years ago. I was really worried about this client. And it was after hours, it was nighttime, and he then was safe and was at the hospital and everything was okay. But it was one of the first times that I had been through that kind of scenario of having to make that difficult call. Yeah. And so I had called my supervisor at the time, and I was running through, okay, I did this, but did I do that? I don't think I did that right. And this was probably wrong. And he reacted this way. And what is going to happen? Is he going to, what is, right? Exactly like you're saying. Yeah. I'm in it, evaluating everything, writing my clinical notes, keeping record of everything. My supervisor on the phone to me said, Danny, stop. And I was like, oh, he's never spoken to me like that before. Danny, stop. And I was like, oh okay. He said, you need to not think about this anymore tonight. You let this go and we'll deal with it tomorrow, the next week, whatever it is, when I was back at the office. You're done for the night. And it was like, oh, okay. And that kind of helped me unlatch from it. And so there's various strategies of these thought stopping exercises. But for us,
that's
one of
like
them,
the responsible for that you shared.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I was taking it on heavy. So if I'm finding myself spiraling, ruminating on a work-related issue that, again, doesn't need my attention right now. My client was safe at the hospital. There's nothing more for me to do in that moment, or apply that to your own workspace, right? What is my thought-stopping strategy? So that there's that metacognition where I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm ruminating. I'm thinking, can I be the supervisor that will tell my mind stop? And what might that be? That is through prayer. God, I'm thinking about it again. I give it up to you. I'm giving God my thoughts. Is it, okay, I'm going to engage. One of the ways is to get into my body, to get out of my head. Yeah. So doing something physical can often help me.
Working out. And I've said this for so long, how like the de-stressor of just letting go of my day in working out is so important to me. And it's hard to relate to people.
So much that he pops his ribs out.
Yeah, to the point where I've been sitting uncomfortably and I just tweaked it there. I gotta stop laughing. But yeah, like, absolutely right. Getting into your body, and I never thought about it that way. That make to get out of your head.
Yeah,
even though your head is inside your body. Oof, mind blowing.
Chris, stop.
Thank you.
Okay,
there it is.
We have to wrap up now. But
I know. Again, we did not have enough time, and we need to schedule this way longer, because this is too good having you here to answer all our problems.
we would like you to be here every 5 weeks. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll have Dr. Danielle Jeffery back again. And if you could, please subscribe on our YouTube page. We would love to be able to have dubs in different languages so that anyone can watch and listen.
Also, in the comments for this episode, when you see this, leave us questions that you'd like to us to talk about on the next episode with Dr. Danny.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Follow us on social media, Instagram at Squabbling Saints, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.